I come from a place of perpetual translation. Growing up between Cairo and Dubai, between Egyptian Arabic at home and British English at school, between American cable television and Islamic prayers, I learned early on that stories don't sit in one place, they exist in the spaces in between. Theater became my way of making sense of the multiple truths that I and that each of us carry within. Similarly, when I first came to New York as an 18-year-old international student, people would often ask me if I was an Arab playwright bringing Arab stories to the United States or an Arab American writer. And I was always stumped by that question. I was unsure which of these affinity spaces I was supposed to be fitting into. To complicate this further, New York quickly became a home for me. So I was conscious that I didn't share the same positionality as an Arab artist touring their work to the US. And yet, I also knew that the label Arab American did not quite capture my experience. Because more often than not, I found myself connecting more with a fellow immigrant artist, say a Peruvian dancer who also arrived here at 18, than with an or an Arab American who was born and raised in the US. Eventually, I realized that the answer for me was not one or the other. Like so many of us who create from the diaspora, from the margins, from the spaces between fixed identities, I found my power in rejecting these binaries. And I fell in love with theater because it let me recreate the absurdity and profundity of life, more specifically, my life. A life where people who typically wouldn't, or some would even say shouldn't, be in the same space end up there anyway. A life where the general's son falls in love with the mate's son, where the revolution ends up being tweeted in three languages, where your grandmother's folk tales start sounding suspiciously like viral trends on TikTok. I fell in love with theater because it allows us to stage the beautiful complexity of living between cultures in that way, between languages, between ways of being. And in doing so, it allows us to create new ones, to make meaning from these fragmentations. These past few years, I've been collecting stories from Egyptian activists, from queer Arabs in exile, from families trying to hold on to their histories as official narratives are attempting to erase them. The question is why? I think the obvious or expected answer is that of because I want theater to tell our stories. But I've fallen out of love with that adage. I don't think that's why I do theater anymore. I do theater not to tell our stories, but to create these spaces where multiple truths can exist at once. The spaces where we don't have to flatten ourselves into digestible narratives or perform some version of our trauma for somebody else's gaze. That's not the kind of theater I want to make. No, the theater I've found most electrifying, the theater that to me is most deliciously disorienting, from South African prison dramas to Argentine protest plays to Egyptian street performance. That's the kind of theater I want to make. The theater that's not made to educate audiences, but or bridge cultures, but to lay bare the messy, funny, painful truths of how we actually live. It's the kind of theater that I imagine rejected the false choice between being too specific and too universal. The kind of theater that refuses to dilute itself for palatability, and in doing so, actually shatters the walls that are trying to contain it. It's the kind of theater whose theater makers dare to trust that connection happens not despite our differences, but through them. I think the kind of theater that stands firm in its ethos to stage counter narratives to official sanctioned state histories, and in doing so makes space for the stories that those in power would rather silence. Right now, across the world, those in power want us to believe in the simple stories. The stories where it's us versus them, here versus there, tradition versus progress. But those of us who live in the spaces in between know better. We know that revolution can start with a tweet and end with an ancient ritual. We know that family can mean the people who share your blood or the ones that share your secrets. We know that sometimes the most political act is simply just showing people as they are, complex, contradictory, and completely human. And so theater remains one of our most powerful tools for collective imagination, and as a result, resistance. Not the resistance of grand political gestures, but the resistance of the intimate moment. In the moments where we see ourselves reflected in each other's stories. When an immigrant recognizes their story in their new homeland's folktale. When an audience laughs together at a joke that somehow, miraculously, works in three languages. And any of you who write bilingually or trilingually know how hard that is. So today I invite us, theater makers, I invite all of you, not to see theater as a bridge between cultures, but as a home for those of us who live in the spaces in between. To create work that challenges both the societies we come from, yes, but also the ones that we have arrived in. I invite all of you to make theater that doesn't just reflect our world, but theater that helps us imagine a new one. Theater where the spaces between become the spaces of possibility. Because ultimately, that is what theater does best. It gathers strangers in the dark to witness something true. And in that shared breath, in that shared laughter, in that shared silence, we remember that the most powerful stories don't just cross borders, but they dissolve them entirely.